Welcome to the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. My name is Dr. Jinong and I'm your host. I'm a cathartic release therapist, professionally trained as an osteopath, psychosomatic therapist, Western acupuncturist, and herbalist. I'm fascinated by the mind-body connection and how your physical body is a manifestation of your emotional state. I help people get unstuck from their chronic pain, whether it be physical or emotional, and live the life they truly desire, grounded in values and driven by purpose. My aim is to create awareness to the underlying emotions behind pain, injury, and disease in the body, as well as behavioural dysfunctions and mental imbalances that present. I do this using a unique blend of Eastern and Western philosophies and a good dose of intuition. Join me to learn more about the story of your body, what different issues may indicate, how to release emotions so that you can prevent problems, as well as inspiring pain story interviews. Thanks for joining me today, Robyn, to share about yourself and answer what may be some challenging questions today. I'm sure my audience and wherever this podcast goes will be appreciated by many who take the time to listen. To give context to part of the reason we're here today, over a year ago, the first pain story interview I published was with Callaghan, who is a dear friend and is your daughter. She was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer and within a short period of time passed away and is no longer with us in the physical world. She had a huge following in person and on social media as an amazing holistic nutritionist and was very open about her cancer experience. There are some questions that are left unanswered for many people who followed her journey, including many others who are on their own cancer journey. On the podcast and on social media, she did share that she was cancer-free. So a lot of people are wondering what happened to Kate if her cancer was gone. I'd love for you to introduce who you are and what you do. This is as much about you as it is about Kate. And I'm sure we're going to have many messages to share in this.
I've had the experience of being a mother and a working mother, so balancing a professional life and motherhood, which in my day, 30, 40 years ago was a lot harder than it is these days. But still, I do understand how a lot of women feel. And I wanted to be a mother. I enjoyed motherhood, but I also enjoyed my career and still do very much. So I've just found, that's something that I found difficult balancing, especially in a world that was dominated. It was a male-dominated profession as well. So I didn't get a lot of help, a lot of sympathy for being a working mother, basically.
What is your profession?
I'm a veterinary surgeon and I have my own practice in Tamworth, country New South Wales, where Kate was born and raised. And I originally started this practice. I wanted my own practice, but I didn't want to start my own practice until the children were at least in their teens and almost off my hands, hopefully, so that I could give them as much as I could without devoting myself to a practice. And I did 20 years ago start the practice, and it's grown from 1 vet and 2 nurses to now I have 3 employed vets and 4 nurses. So it's become quite a successful practice, and I still love what I do. But I'm at the stage now where I want to pull back a bit. Just especially after Kate passed, I became much more aware of my mortality and much more aware of how quickly things can change, how, 1 minute you've got these people in your life, and then something happens and they're gone, and you just, when you don't expect it, I mean, no mother ever expects to outlive their children. So that was obviously the last thing on my mind. I was more concerned about having time so that I could spend time with Kate and the grandchildren so that they would have more time with me, not the other way around, as I wasn't expecting that to happen. So now I am, especially this one thing, since Kate's gone, I'm much more aware of doing what she would say, don't worry about things, don't sweat the small things, relax more. I read an interesting proverb the other day which said, what did it say, the best time to relax is when you're busy. I thought that was very good. And also today, this is a bit unusual for me, as you said, it could be quite emotional and challenging. So I've taken on board Kate's advice, and I'm wearing my Courage blend and my Calming blend from doTERRA.
I'm sure she'd be very happy that you're taking your advice.
Yes, I'm sure she would.
Can you share a little bit more about who Kate is in your mind?
Well, basically, she was always a very happy, loving child, loving person from a very young age. She was very independent. She always has something to say, and she's always been very independent and a kind, compassionate person, always very selfless. That's one thing, speaking to her friends that she's grown up with and the mothers of those friends. They said one thing about Kate was she was always very kind and very thoughtful. And always put her friends first, and was always there for her friends. If someone needed her, she was there. She was extremely loyal as a friend. And that's what I found as a child. She was loving. She brought me a lot of joy. As I said, at her 25th, I've cried a lot and I've laughed a lot with Kate because she brought me to tears many times, but she also made me laugh. And because she did have the greatest sense of humour. She was amazing. What she achieved in her short time, basically. A lot of things are at school: her dancing, her gymnastics, her sporting achievements, her academic achievements. All on top of the fact that she was, as say, a good person. Just her person, just what she achieved as a person would have been, as a good member of the community would have been enough. And a mother too, amazing wife and mother.
Yeah, she definitely had some strong connections in our local community and in the online space as well.
Yes.
Can you share some of your fondest memories with Kate?
I wasn't one that she would confide in. We didn't have that sort of relationship. She was, as I say, she was very independent, but we were able to do a lot. We'd have a lot of good times together. We went to Fiji together. We went twice actually. On one to Fiji for a holiday for a week. Another time we went on a cruise together. And we had girl weekends. We would go to Sydney for the weekend, and we'd stay at a motel or a hotel and go to a live show. And after the live show, we'd have one or two or three drinks and enjoy our weekend. That was something we did a few times a year, I guess, at least once a year. And then, of course, I had the trip to France with her, which was just amazing. I was so grateful that I had that. That was just an amazing experience. Those 2 weeks were just brilliant. We had fun, and we talked a lot about family and friends, and it was good.
Yeah, and that trip to France, you weren't aware of anything that was going on. So Kate and I did share a little bit more in depth in the interview that we did with one another on the podcast about her journey finding out about the cancer. But did you want to just share a little bit from your perspective how everything happened?
I was very frustrated, terribly frustrated actually, about not being told about the lump. As I say, we had this time in France together. I remember that this was in July. We went away middle of July, and apparently she discovered the lump in June. And while we're away, and she also had intended to go and see the doctor when she got back from France. So it was obviously a concern to her. But while we're away, she never mentioned it once. And even one time we had a picnic in the park in Ile-sur-le-Sorgue, and we sat there, and she said to me, wanted to know about me, how I was feeling, how life was going for me, how the practice was going, how the family were going. And we just talked openly, and I asked about her, and she said, I'm very, very happy. She said she was very happy, having a wonderful husband like Aaron and the kids. And she said, everything's good in my life. I'm very happy. And I think back about that, and I think, she had the opportunity then to say something, even though, but it did frustrate me. And even now, I think, it did upset me that she didn't, and frustrated that she didn't confide then, because I would have been more proactive. I would have actually been on her to follow it up more quickly, and it certainly wouldn't have, if I'd been aware, it wouldn't have dragged on as long as it did. I'm absolutely certain, because I would have been very concerned. But I also know that that's basically Kate's way. I've had to learn that it's how Kate used to do things. She liked to do things her way, and she also was always concerned about other people, and she was always concerned about me. She was almost like the mother figure for me. She was always concerned. She always worried about me and worried about my health and worried about my emotional well-being, and never wanted to worry me. So that's why I think she didn't often confide in me about things. She would confide with her good friends or with her brother. I know David, she used to talk a lot to David if she had issues to deal with, because he's mentioned more recently they used to talk a lot. They were very close. Shortly after Kate passed in New Zealand, a friend sent me a book called Phosphorescence by Julia Baird. Now, Julia Baird is a journalist, and she actually had cancer as a young woman, married with 2 young children. And she spoke about her cancer journey, and she did survive, but she spoke about the fact that she had to go into herself to be able to fight the cancer. She talked about growing by the light of the moon. She said some plants even grow by or respond in different ways to the light of the moon, a phenomenon known as celantropism. It's an almost invisible movement happening in the dark, on the quiet, the plants slowly curling in by night, unobserved. Something similar happened to me after that. I was diagnosed with cancer. When the world grew dark, I furled and I grew. Inevitably, the illness changed me irrevocably, but when I didn't expect it, that my strength would also inch upwards. Quietly, almost imperceptibly, and often in the darkest moments, alone in the wee hours of the night, I developed an enduring determination that took me even by surprise. For most of my life, I confided all the minutiae, the agonies and the triumphs of my life to a cadre of close friends. But during this period, I drew myself in, and in turn, I grew calmer. And I think that says it all about Kate. I think that's what she, not knowingly, but that's probably herself. She had that recognition too, that she realised that she had to grow in and keep it to it, and that positivity. She knew she had to keep being positive, and the more people she told, the more people she involved, the more likely there'd be negative vibes coming in, and I think she just thought that she had to do it herself.
Can you just talk a little bit more about what it was like to be a mum to Kate while she was going through her cancer experience?
It was very difficult even before COVID, because, again, Kate wanted to stay positive, and to do that, she talked very little about the cancer, and only when she needed to, and basically she'd ring me about results of scans, or she was going to have a scan, she was going to have a test done. I didn't even know about the lump until a week before she had the initial mammogram and ultrasound. So we basically went from the announcement that she had a lump, and 10 days later she's got stage 4 breast cancer. So that's because she had said nothing. She left it to that, and then obviously realised she had to tell us. So she had to bring it out then. So it was a formal thing. She actually rang. We did a FaceTime, a FaceTime consult basically with Kate and Aaron, where she announced that she had stage 4 breast cancer. So that was a bit of a shock. I actually wasn't that shocked. I guess, unfortunately, I just know too much, and it's so. She was trying to be positive and saying, and I was trying to be positive, but I knew in my own mind, I thought, this is not looking good. This is not looking good at all. Even when she mentioned, because she said it was a 5-centimetre lump, that's a very big lump. Yeah, that's quite substantial. So she didn't talk about the negatives, and she made it clear to me that any negative conversations would result in the termination of that conversation. Because I did have one of the conversations where she was talking about going to Mexico, and we said at the time, I said, whatever you need to do, we will support you, financially, and it's up to you what you want to do. But I did have a little conversation. I did ring to basically, I was concerned that maybe she hadn't considered that if she went, I thought she was going for 3 months, and so I thought, if you're going to Mexico for 3 months and it doesn't work, you've lost that time with your children. So I started to say this conversation. She stopped me and she said, "You keep talking like this, I'm not going to talk to you anymore." So look, okay. She made it very clear we don't even consider that as a possibility at this stage. We don't talk about the what ifs. So since then, whenever I spoke with her, I always tried to be lighthearted. I always tried to tell her about fun things that were happening in my life. I tried to make her laugh. And it was, if she wanted to tell me something, it was, unless I wanted to know about a scam, but if anything, I would let her lead the conversation if it was to do with the cancer, so to speak.
And how did that feel for you?
It was frustrating. It was very frustrating, especially when, being a mother, you want to be protective, you want to be able to help, you want to be able to do something in that situation. And then, of course, COVID made it even worse, because I would see images of her on Instagram and Facebook and something, crying, and not being able to hold her. As a mother, you want to protect your child, and I just wanted to be able to hold her until it was okay. But I could see this image and so far away, and I couldn't be there, and that was heartbreaking. Yeah.
Can you share a little bit more, because I guess there are people in similar situations to Kate, and then there are mothers of daughters and sons with cancer as well. And this is your perspective and your story, but what would you like to share with the people who are going through their own cancer experience and the mothers and the fathers out there?
I mean, certainly someone like a mother needs to know these things, but I think at the same time make it clear that you need to be positive, rather than sort of leaving it to the last minute and then hitting them and then saying, I want to be positive and no negativity, or just to let them know. Do include them, but make it clear that you may seem distant, you may seem negative, like times not wanting to talk about it. That's the way you will heal yourself. You have to do that to heal. Otherwise, it's going to make it harder if they're worrying about what we're thinking at the same time. But it's important to know that a mother is going to worry more the less she knows. The more she knows, probably the less she's going to worry. And that was in my case, and especially with my bit of medical knowledge, I could just imagine all the worst case scenarios. But it had been better to have been kept in the loop and to know where she was at. And I could make some input and know that everything was being done that could be done, because I know now in hindsight it wasn't. And that's so hard to know that, I could possibly have intervened. Whether the outcome would have been the same or not, I don't know, because obviously we're never going to know, or it'd be very hard to know that had Kate been diagnosed, a few weeks earlier, whether that would have made much difference or not, whether, that with that time frame of a month or so, would make that much difference.
Yeah. So she knew that she had a lump, and then you guys went away to France in July. And then something that Kate and I discussed on the interview was that she did a hormone test, which showed alarmingly high estrogen levels, which then motivated her to go and get the lump checked out. We'll go into that a little bit more later. And then it was November that she had the mammogram, and she was diagnosed immediately with stage 4 cancer, and she had spots on her liver. So stage 4 meaning that it had metastasized or spread, and it was in her liver. But she actually felt completely healthy. Even up to the day of the diagnosis, the only symptom really was that she had this lump in her breast, which was quite large. I remember her letting me feel it, and I was like, oh my gosh, if you had have told me about that, I would have definitely said you should have done something about that.
Exactly.
And within a very short period of time, I know that she was not one to ask for help, but friends jumped in, and she was all over all of the alternative options that she could look at, as well as the conventional options too. She was first of all told that she could have a mastectomy, which she was preparing herself for. But then when they found out that it had metastasized, that was not an option anymore. So then she started researching alternative therapies, and that brought her to Mexico, which was a Hope for Cancer, which was a pretty significant expense. However, everyone rallied, and I think she was just overwhelmed, her and her family, you guys as well, just overwhelmed by how many people gave to Kate. Within a matter of a couple of weeks, I think it was over $150,000 raised. And 2 weeks later, she was on a plane to go to Mexico.
Yes, I do remember clearly the day she contacted me on the Friday morning to say that, because she spoke the Thursday, the day before, she had told me about going to Mexico, about thought of going to Mexico, and the main thing was the cost. And it was that afternoon that her friends decided to set up the GoFundMe. She rang me on Friday morning to say that, and to send me the link. And so I said something. I said, ask her. I'd asked her for the link. That's right, because I had people already. I'd mentioned a couple of people, and they said they would donate. And she said, "Well, it's not quite up yet." And anyway, she got up, and then I think it was 9 o'clock. I spoke with her. 1 o'clock that day, our time, it was already up to, I think, 70,000. 9 o'clock that night, it was up to 100,000. She was very quiet. Because, she'd been told the worst possible, because the doctor had said to her, all we can offer you is palliative care. That was basically it. That was the phone call she had on the Wednesday night when she was by herself with the 2 children, and she just basically cried herself to sleep that night because Aaron was away, unfortunately, and being told that over the phone as well. It was pretty dramatic and traumatic. So the Thursday she was very quiet talking to me, but I spoke to her on the Saturday morning. I said, "You must be feeling so much more buoyant." And she said, "I am." She was just so happy and so positive that the Mexico trip would be good. And shortly after that, she asked me if I wanted to go with her, and I was overjoyed because I thought finally I get a chance to be involved. Because I hadn't had a chance before that, and I thought, well, I can have some involvement here, at least, even though it's a bit later than I would have liked it. And it was a great experience. Actually, I'm so glad I did too, because as I said before, I was a little bit sceptical, as a lot of people are about. I mean, I've always been involved with alternative therapies. One of my best friends is a naturopath, and I use alternative therapies like acupuncture and homeopathy and this sort of thing in vet medicine. So I'm always open to these things, but I was a bit worried about what everyone worried about was the fact that, going over there and it not working, or spending all that money and it not working, and being disillusioned. But it was nowhere that at all. I was glad because the clinic itself, they were very professional. They were always, all of them, right down to the receptionist, caring, friendly. You just felt welcome. You felt cared for. The doctor, Dr. Mal, he was just beautiful. He was a lovely man, caring, compassionate. He was very honest with Kate about her situation. He didn't, pull his stops and he didn't cut. It was quite clear that he was concerned about the liver, and about the fact that her scan showed so many secondaries in her liver, and that was going to be the biggest issue. So he was very open about that. I love the fact that he asked her to talk about her journey, about what had happened so far with her. He was incredulous that no scans were done at the first consult. He just was blown away by that. He couldn't believe that a scan wouldn't have been done at the first consult. But he asked her also, he said, asked her about how she was feeling emotionally at the time, that time of the consult with him, and he asked her how she was feeling physically, and he said to her, and how are you feeling spiritually? And I thought it was just something lovely about the whole thing, and I felt really confident then that that something good would come out of it, and it did. It was very intensive treatment. It was exhausting for her and for me, the times I spent with her, but she was exhausted, and she did have one meltdown while I was there, which was good because it gave me an opportunity to assist there basically and just give her my support. But in the mornings and the evenings, we had go for walks on the beach, and she would meditate on the beach, and then we go for a swim, and then we go for a walk and watch the moon. Watch the sunset and the moon go down over the ocean, and so it was and we'd have dinner together, and we'd talk about different things. So that was only 5 days, but that was lovely. That's the last time I actually saw Kate, so it was nice. I was worried, but I was able to leave there, and I was able to tell Aaron when I got home, she's in good hands. And that I thought it was a good thing she had done, and even the other cancer patients who were there, because Kate was actually the youngest patient at the time, which impacted her as well. She was quite devastated when she realised that how young she was with cancer. But they all took her under their wings. They were just lovely people as well, and all positive. Everybody was just so positive. It was just, that was the one thing that came out of it, the whole thing. Everyone was positive. Everyone was working towards achieving a cancer-free situation. So and nothing was going to stop them. They were all determined they were going to do it, which was great.
Because the trip to Mexico, it was scheduled to be 3 weeks, and there were intentions to go and visit there again in the future. And she also had to leave her kids in New Zealand, and each week she had someone different with her. So you were with her, another friend Tracy was with her, and then Aaron went over as well. And just to talk about Kate's liver, this is another thing that I remember feeling on her body as well, that her liver was actually right down to her belly button, when it was really
huge.
It should be sitting under your rib cage, and you shouldn't really be able to feel it. So I'm just amazed, such an important organ in the body, and it was that enlarged that she didn't feel any ill effects from it at all. So she went to Mexico. She hadn't had any conventional treatment. She was not poo-pooing the conventional treatment. She was very open to it, but she wanted to make the most of this other therapy. And she was engaging with a lot of people who had been to the centre as well. So during the time in Mexico, and then just throughout Kate's cancer journey, did your relationship with her change at all?
Yes, I do believe it did. I think we actually grew closer because she would start to confide more. We would talk more, and I realised that I needed to be more blunt with her about keeping in touch. And it was interesting because COVID hit, and at the same time as COVID hit, she was going through chemo. And I ended up in hospital in St Vincent's in Sydney having open heart surgery. So we would talk, and of course, again, she was worried about me. So we would talk or text or talk every day while I was in hospital, which was good. And then it was while I was in hospital that she got the results to say, or she sent me a copy of the results to say that the scan showed that she was basically cancer-free. She had been told she was in the recovery phase, and I went back through my texts and I found the actual report, which did say that the bone lesions had gone, that they couldn't detect any obvious lesions in the liver. They said it was hard to tell because of the scarring, but they were pretty sure it was scarring and no actual lesions left in the liver. And there were no lymph nodes enlarged, and that the actual breast lump was almost imperceptible, which after going from 5 centimetres to almost imperceptible is pretty good. So she had achieved what she set out to do. She had, and she would have. Again, it's frustrating because the liver is the worst organ you can get. It's the worst and the best. It's the worst because of the risk of things like the cirrhosis and the portal hypertension that she got, but it's also the best in that the liver regenerates so well. So if you can get to the situation, that happy balance of getting the liver on its, maintain the liver and helping the liver to regenerate, while you're not getting this negative effects, or minimizing the negative effects, you can often get through. But from what I understand with liver metastases, with this cirrhosis that she had, the result of it. It's called malignant cirrhosis, and basically it's just the damage done by the scarring to the liver. Even with all the possible treatments, you're only looking at maybe 2 to 3 years. And so that's what a lot of people don't realise, or two things I wanted to make clear to people, especially those who are have been following her journey and couldn't understand why she seemed to be fine and then the next thing she's gone. She actually did achieve what she wanted to achieve. So they should never give up, because and also she did slip through the cracks a little bit. If certain things could have been done sooner, that might have changed the outcome. But because she had got those tumours in the liver, and she developed this thing called malignant. And the malignant cirrhosis isn't common. It doesn't happen every time. But it meant that her damage was quite severe, and she was not going to live a long time. She had hope. She knew that. She understood that towards the end, and she knew that. But she was hoping with the procedure they were going to do that she might have 2 to 3 years.
You just reminded me she did have some bone metastases possibly in her sternum, and she had a lymph node. And wasn't it actually after she returned from Mexico, the lump had almost gone?
Yes.
And the lymph
and
node...
the liver was much smaller. The lump had almost gone. She did have ascites, and that's the vomiting blood and the fluid in her abdomen, the ascites. They are both signs of this what they call portal hypertension, actually. And the best way to describe it is that what happened to Kate was the main blood vessel that goes through the liver, which helps return blood to the heart. It's the portal vein. Now, it's quite a high pressure vein, as you can imagine. The blood going through there is quite high pressure. And what happened with her is that the scarring from the tumours was pressing on that vessel. And so it was then increasing the blood pressure that was going into the vessels in her stomach and the bottom part of her esophagus, the food pipe. Just like if people have varicose veins, it's exactly the same sort of thing. The pressure goes in, the veins swell, and if you get varicose veins, they burst and you get ulcers and this sort of thing. Well, what was happening with her, the pressure was going into the bottom of her esophagus, and the vessels there were enlarging, blood vessels, and then rupturing. And that's what the blood was she was vomiting. And so what she would do each time she went down to Dunedin is they would do what they call banding, esophageal banding, or they'd put bands on these ulcers to try and stop all these varices, to stop them bleeding, and that would work for a while. Unfortunately, and the problem is too that each time she had a bleed, when that blood went back into her system, it was a toxic product the liver had to deal with. So it was a bit of a vicious cycle going on there. And basically all she needed was to be able to relieve the pressure on that portal vein long enough for the liver to heal, and she would have survived longer. But unfortunately, she had 2 more bleeds, and then the one where she ended up in hospice in Dunedin, she'd actually spoken with the specialist, and he had said he was very positive. Her liver function was good. He said she was a good candidate. He wanted to try medical treatment first, so he put her on drugs to try and decrease that that pressure. And then he was going to do a thing called a TIPS procedure, which basically puts a shunt between the gut and the liver, so you're taking that pressure again off that vein. Unfortunately, and that was just before her birthday. And on her birthday, she sounded great. She looked great. She was feeling really buoyed. She was feeling great, and she said her energy levels had increased. And it was a few days after that she was going to celebrate her birthday with some friends, and she had another bleed. And then and she was also, well, that was just before she was due to have a final scan for this specialist before having the TIPS procedure. And then on the Monday she had the banding done. The Tuesday she actually went into what they call hepatic encephalopathy. So basically her liver started to fail, and the toxic products that the liver normally gets rid of in the body out through feces and other waste areas went to her brain. And what it does, it can cause all sorts of, it can cause slurred speech, vision, right up to full-blown seizures or coma. And it was interesting because that day I spoke with her, I didn't see her, I spoke with her, and her speech sounded a bit strange, and she was saying some unusual things, but she kept saying, I'm very tired. And so I thought, well, so I didn't think anything of it. And it wasn't until, and then she went into liver failure, and the next day Aaron rang, because the hospital rang, and said they didn't know how much longer she would live for. So that, but it was all associated with this portal hypertension. And so I would think Kate would want to make sure that I let people know who got breast cancer. It's, this is an unusual thing. It's not common. So they don't give up. If you've been following Kate's journey and she had kept you positive, keep going. Because had she managed to get that TIPS procedure, she would have lived longer.
So it was the cirrhosis and the scarring in the liver that ultimately caused the portal hypertension and all of this bleeding and liver failure. That's why she actually passed away. As a consequence of the cancer, that's why she has this, but she didn't actually die from the cancer.
The cancer, no.
Yeah.
No.
So thank you for clearing that up and also just sharing your knowledge about it. I just wanted to backtrack a little bit. So she came back from Mexico. She started chemotherapy, and I think she got through 8+ rounds, but then COVID hit.
Back to back. Yes, 8 rounds back to back, which is, amazing. And I couldn't get over when I was speaking with her. And a lot of people said the same thing. She would say to me, because she researches, as she always does, everything, and I actually watched the little blog she did before she started the chemo, explaining to people what she was going to do, and the idea of fasting beforehand and exercising after. Because the day of chemo, she wasn't too bad. The next day, she said, I would crash like I had a bad dose of the flu and spend the day in bed. And then the next day, she was feeling better. After, I think it was about the second or third chemo, I was trying to ring on the weekend. I couldn't contact her. And she got back to me on the Sunday, said, oh, sorry, Mum, we went camping. I thought, oh, yes, as you do. So that was just Kate. Life was normal. Life went ahead as normal. She was not going to let this cancer get in the way of having a normal life. And I have another interesting anecdote. My niece, who was the last member of the family to see Kate, she went over to New Zealand, and she actually went because she said, I had a feeling that I had to be there. She said, I had a feeling that because she's a solicitor and she deals with some of these cases, and she said, I've been researching it, and she said, I thought, this is not good. And so she went over. And she said, and she and Kate did lots of talking and what have you, and they had a really good time. But she said, I was very careful not to take too many photos, because she said, I didn't want Kate to get the impression that I was taking photos because I thought I wasn't going to. Because she said, just when I was wanting to take photos, Kate was a little bit, why you want to take photos? So she was a bit suspicious. But when she came, the interesting thing was, she said, when I got back home, to my husband and my little boy, she said, I thought I was envious of Kate. And she thought, that's because she's so happy. She had this wonderful husband, beautiful children, her new home, living in an idyllic situation, proper place. And she said, I was envious. And I had to pull myself up and say, hang on, she's got cancer. She said, such was her positivity that you'd forget that she had cancer. Yeah, it was amazing, absolutely amazing. Yeah.
With her chemotherapy, did she voluntarily finish it?
Yes, she did. Yes, they said that they didn't think she needed. Normally they would go 12, but they said that they did the scan and they said they didn't think that at that stage they decided that they would recheck in 6 weeks unless she had any clinical signs that caused her to be concerned.
And I just wanted to go a little bit more into the TIPS procedure, because this was something that Kate was actually searching out privately, and with the very generous offerings from a friend of yours in Australia as well.
Yes.
Which I guess it just comes back to the whole advocating for yourself, because
Yes.
I don't think that it was something that was offered to her. She did her research as to what could extend her life.
Yes, I agree with that. And in fact, that was something that was frustrating to me because I had just gotten out of hospital when she had the second bleed. Because the first one, I was in hospital, and that was the very first bleed she had and went down to Dunedin. And the second time, I didn't.
Actually, so I just wanted to cover this because just her determination. She actually she had her first bleed when she was due to fly back from Mexico.
Oh, sorry, she did too. Sorry, yes, you're
And
right.
it
Sorry,
was
yes.
ridiculously amount of blood that she vomited
I
up, and I
know,
don't
and
think she
she
should have gotten on the
white-knuckled it all the way
plane, but she
home.
did.
But that was another. You're right. Actually, it was her first bleed, and she had this enormous amount of ascites then too, and she even confessed to me that that was probably a silly thing to do, that she probably should have stayed and had the treatment there before coming home. But she was so concerned about the cost. And this is another thing. She had this money that had been donated to her. I've got to be seen to be using this money properly. She said, because people have donated, I don't want to use it. She said, I'm not going to spend on Jimmy Choo shoes, which was just a parallel. And but it was still part of the cancer treatment I was talking about. And that's why she white-knuckled it back to Auckland, because it was going to cost more to have treatment in Mexico. It would be in US dollars, but it wasn't going to be $250,000, and because the clinic was there as well, it may have had a better outcome. It may have had a better outcome. Yes,
I think she ended up in hospital when she came back from Auckland for about a week, and then there was another time. It was strange. Every time it happened was when she was about to go and do something for herself. So I think the next time she was going to go to a hotel with Olivia and ended up in hospital again and was pretty over it by that time. And then the last time was on her birthday, celebration day.
Yes. And you're right. She was that one where she and Olivia were going to go to Queenstown for the weekend. They were going to have a girls' weekend in Queenstown, which I thought was lovely, because I thought, well, I know she's thinking of what we used to do as as mother and daughter and those sort of things. And but I rang, and again she didn't let me know. But I'd learned that if Kate wasn't, I would just push. Whereas before, if I didn't hear from her, I'd say, oh, she'll contact me now. I thought, no, if I don't hear from her, I'm going to follow up. And I rang on the Friday morning when she was in the hospital at Dunedin. And at that stage, the oncologist said that they couldn't do any more. They just passed on to the gastroenterologists. So she's in a different ward altogether. And I just got, from her text she sent me, I just got a vibe that things weren't right. Because I'd said to her in the text, I said, what are they doing about liver function, and is there anything they can do? And she just texted back and said to me, I think they've told me they're doing everything they can, or they've done everything they can. And my immediate response was bull, absolute bull. I could not believe. I thought, if she was a dog, there'd be things we could do. So I rang her, and I FaceTimed her, and she was crying. She was crying alone in a hospital bed. And I said to her, I said, what? And she'd know there's nothing more they can do, blah blah blah. And so I said, well, I don't believe that. And I said, I'll get back. So I got off the phone. I immediately rang her friend in Sydney, and he's an amazing young man. And he said to me, leave it to me, Robyn, I'll get back to you. And within 2 hours, he had managed to speak to someone in the field who said, yes, there is this TIPS procedure. Yes, it can, it's not cirrhosis. Like they understood the situation, what they were talking about. And next thing, Kate had an appointment with a specialist in Auckland for the following week, which was amazing, because this same specialist, Kate had actually emailed him to ask about the TIPS procedure. And the same day, he actually got back to her to say he had an appointment for her on the 11th. But her friend in Australia said, that's not good enough, I want it brought forward. And I don't know what connections this guy has, but he, the doctor did a phone consult with her the following week. And he said to her, and they sent, and that was nothing. I said, you make sure your doctors send all the scans and things. And I kept pestering all day Friday. Have you contacted your oncologist to send all those scans? to the doctor and the specialist. He said, yes, I had. I said, good. So I became really proactive then, and that's why I decided I'm not going to sit back now anymore. I'm just going to keep pushing this and pushing this. But yeah, and when she spoke to him again, her whole demeanour improved, because she said that day she'd been in hospital with which was officially the third bleed, but it was the one before her birthday. They had told her that there was nothing more they could do. She said it was all doom and gloom, and they started talking to her about referring her to hospice, which knocked her for six. Talking hospice care is like end of life, and she wasn't prepared for that. And especially when she found out there were things could be done. And she was just horrified by that. And when she spoke to the doctor a week later, he was much more positive. I mean, he was realistic. He said, we don't know, with the TIPS procedure it varies, but he did say if we could protect her liver long enough, the liver will regenerate. And he thought up to 5 years. That's what he was telling her. He said it may only be months. He did say that it may only be months, but possibly up to 5 years. So that was enough for her to pursue that. And he said all he needed was one more scan, because it had been over a month since the final scan, just to make sure there were no lesions, because obviously there's no point in doing the TIPS procedure if you've actually got cancer in the liver. And she was scheduled for that Monday. Whereas if possibly she'd had the second bleed, after the first time she was helicoptered down and they did the banding, that's something that could have been mentioned to her then. Definitely.
Yeah. Do you have anything to share about that? Just giving people options, because yes, it probably would have been a really expensive procedure, but when we're talking about someone's life, often the money is not a concern.
No.
People can find it.
Exactly, and that's what is so frustrating, that she wasn't, that they did. That's exactly how it was with Kate, because she had no private insurance. She was never offered the alternatives, never even mentioned the possibility, never even gave her the opportunity to make that decision herself.
And I think that's a big part of sharing this story as well, is just letting people know, if you're able to, because obviously you've got to focus on your health and your well-being and your mental health. And some people will not have the capacity to do the research that Kate was doing.
No, exactly. It
is just letting you know that advocate for yourself, ask questions, know that there's another way. I mean, there were so many times that Kate refused to listen to the advice that she was given.
Yes.
Especially when it was a poor prognosis. And, some people would say, well, yes, it hasn't ended up great, but you have filled the gaps to talk about, the other things that were actually possible, but perhaps the timings just weren't there.
No, and I was a bit frustrated that it frustrates me. I've learned, and it's a terrible thing to say, I've had to learn to not to totally think that your doctor or your medical practitioner knows everything, is going to tell you everything. You do have to still look after yourself, which shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have to self-advocate, but there are situations where we do. We can't assume that they're going to do everything they can do or tell you everything that they can do. And that was one thing. I had a friend who had breast cancer and she survived, and she said to me to tell Kate the 3 Fs. She said friends, family, and faith. And Kate, I told Kate that, and she said, that's good advice. And she had like the family and the friends in oodles, oodles of the support there. But the faith, she had faith in herself, but I think she also had faith in health professionals, and they let her down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So just again to share Kate's journey to diagnosis, this is not in an attempt to pull anyone under by any means. And I know that you're very diplomatic with your view on what happened. But she shared that she went to get the lump investigated and was dismissed as too young and too healthy, mum of 2 kids. She was breastfeeding her youngest at the time. She didn't really agree with that. Obviously, the lump was still bothering her. And I think it was a couple of months later, she sought out a second opinion, where she was offered a referral, told, it's probably nothing to worry about, which I can understand why someone would communicate that, not to cause concern. And then unfortunately the referral got lost in the system, and she had to once again follow this up.
Yes.
And then, because it was July that she got it investigated, I think, so it wasn't until November things
Exactly
really
by
started
time,
to
yes.
happen. Yeah. So she got sent for a scan, and then she was immediately referred for a mammogram, and that was that really short period of time of the 10 days that you were talking about, where she just went from having a lump to immediate diagnosis of stage 4 cancer. So you did have an opportunity to speak to the doctor involved. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes.
And
yes.
perhaps some of the emotions that were going through your head beforehand?
Yes, I really wanted, I think because I spoke to you about it, I really wanted to speak with her. I needed closure, but I was angry and frustrated, and I really wasn't sure how I was going to approach it. That's where it was great. You're a big help there to tell me, because it was the right way to do it. I went there without to be non-confronting and non-blaming, but just to ask some questions. And I was so glad I did it, because the doctor concerned was very she was actually devastated herself by the whole thing. It actually impacted her. It's something that really it really came home to her, that because she could feel it herself. And she did blame herself a lot for not sending straight off. She did explain that the guidelines in New Zealand, they have to be selective. I know New Zealand, being a small country, and with the health system, they've got to watch the funds. But she said normally she would err on the side of being cautious rather than not. But she said because Kate was so fit and healthy, so aware, and because she was in what they called a grey area, because she'd been breastfeeding, and often you can get lumps and things when you're in the breast still. She said that was no excuse, though. She said she'll never do it again. She said she will never hesitate again. If a woman comes to her with a lump, no matter what age, whatever the health situation, whatever, she said she will definitely get a scan done. She also she showed me some emails. Kate expressed what she wanted, following the diagnosis, and this doctor has responded to that. And I know that she took Kate's case to staff meeting, and also to raise awareness and to maybe change protocols there. And she also followed up the email situation, and now they're making sure that they're proactive and they're checking within a week. Email goes, even if it says it's gone, they're following up in a week. I know friends of Kate's wanted to take it further, but I didn't think that's what Kate wanted. And I think if changes are made, if things improve there, that's all Kate would want. Because she said to me, she just doesn't want anyone else to be in the same situation as her. She thinks if they can stop young people like her dying, then the job's done. That's all she needed to have done.
How old was Kate, by the way?
36, just turned 36. The doctor had actually heard about Kate's diagnosis, and she emailed her and said to her that she was so sorry to hear about it, and that she would, if Kate didn't mind, she would take her case to the staff meeting and what have you, to try and change things. But Kate did send her a couple of questions. She said, "Why is it not routine to send a patient with a lump, regardless of history or risk factors, of which I have none for breast cancer, for a referral to get further screening done? It didn't cost me anything other than fuel, so it would seem like a good idea to err on the side of caution so situations like mine don't occur again. Is there a system in place for ensuring electronic referrals are received by the breast screening unit in Dunedin? If I wasn't proactive in following up on the referral, how much longer would have been left unseen, undiagnosed and untreated? And what would this have looked like in regards to the spread of my cancer? I consider myself to be more proactive with my health than most. So how many others could be slipping through the system and not getting diagnosed and treated early and have better outcomes and potentially less extreme treatments required?" There were so many cracks poor Kate slipped through in the system. That the initial consult, then the second consult with a referral, and then the delay, and then the whole delay with sorting out what treatment they're going to give her, and then saying there was only palliative care, and then finally she had chemo, and then of course not being told about the TIPS procedure. If you put all that together, that's that could have made obviously a significant difference to the outcome.
We were in a lockdown between end of March and early June. And it was around mid-June that Kate ended up in hospital and then hospice. So you were not able to be with her in those last moments. Can you share anything about that?
The New Zealand government, the woman who Lou was dealing with, there was one thing we left out with David's application, the visa application. She rang Lou on the Saturday and asked for information. So I got the information, sent it to her. This is on a Saturday, this woman rang. So, so being proactive to try and get us in the sky by Tuesday. And they knew we were flying out at 3:00 on the Tuesday. We had our visas at 6 from New Zealand, permission to go, and visas by 6:00 on Tuesday morning. We were still waiting to hear anything back from our government. And so we missed that flight. On the Wednesday, we still hadn't heard anything. And Lou, our travel agent, had been trying to ring, but all she got, there was no actual one person you could speak to. You just got to speak to a receptionist who said, I can't give you any update. I can't give you any update. And that was it. I went to our local member in Tamworth, who's a friend. He rang the federal member, and within 2 hours, we had our visas. And that we thought was shocking, that what was it to them that we were going? And the reason we were going, our daughter was dying. And New Zealand, they're the ones most at risk of having us there. And they did everything, they pulled out all stops to get us there. So that made us very cranky. We were very angry about that. So that was I just cried and cried and cried and cried when we missed that first plane, because we would have actually been in New Zealand when she died, if it hadn't been for that. But we actually didn't fly. She actually died on the Thursday, and then we flew out on the Friday. So even if we had been in quarantine, it still would have been possible to be there and maybe talk, to her the night before, talk to her beforehand. Because the last time I actually spoke with Kate was in the hospice when she did her Lazarus act and and came back to us. Funny, so we should actually talk about that, because that was amazing. That's another example of what an amazing young woman she was. Amazing.
I think everyone thought that she was gone when she was in a coma.
Yes.
And everyone flocked down to Dunedin to be at the hospice with her.
That's right, just to say the last goodbyes. And she, but this is typical Kate. She thought, no, unfinished business. I can't go yet. So nope, if I come again. And I'd spent all Thursday crying, just about crying, because we're still in Australia, And Marilyn, Aaron's mum, was wonderful. She kept me up to date with what's happening, and she kept saying, if Aaron's not, I'll make sure someone's with her the whole time. Don't you worry. There'll be someone beside her bed all the time. If Aaron's not here, I'll be here. And then she contacted me and she said, oh, Kate just got up and asked me for some toast and Vegemite. I thought, what? Yeah, she just sat up and said, where's my toast and Vegemite? Just out of the blue. And that was it. And then it just went on from there. And then some Friday morning, I was actually speaking to a friend who was ringing me because she'd heard, and just telling me how terrible, because she knew Kate as a little girl and this sort of thing. And I said, and I got this incoming call on my phone from Kate. And I said, Denise, I've got to go. Kate's calling. I'm sort of like, what? So yeah, and she just said, and then she just asked me if I had time for chat that afternoon. And I thought, I was just like, I was spinning. What's going on here? So and then I spoke to a few people. I spoke to the doctor, who also was unbelievably amazed that she'd come back. But I had a lovely chat with her that afternoon. We had a FaceTime, and it was a really good chat. It was, again, we just talked positive stuff. And but she actually was so funny, because she said to me, so do you understand what happened to me, Mum? And I said, she said, I had hepatic encephalopathy. Yes, I know. I said, I know exactly what you had. I know what happened. She said, yes. She said, but I'm better now. And she said, we're not to worry, she said, because she said, it's just a little hitch. She said, now what we need to do, she said, is we need to make arrangements to get this next scan so I can have the TIPS procedure.
So then she managed to come home.
Yes.
Do you want to fill in any gaps? And I am hoping to speak to Aaron and have him share his side of the story as well.
Yes, he'd have more there, because I know I knew she had, because that she said she was having more liver tests done on the Monday to see what was happening, to see whether it was worth still going forward. And she had the test done on the Monday and her liver function was good. So she was still a candidate for the TIPS procedure. The Tuesday she texted me she's saying to me, she said she wants to make sure she saw a copy of the letter that we got for the New Zealand government or from our end to get permission to go over there. And of course, it was quite confronting. She said, I read that letter, Mum. She said, it was very confronting, but it's not reality. And so you're not to worry. And I said to her, I'm not worried, darling. I know exactly. I said, we had to get that letter so we could actually, so the government would let us travel because of COVID. And it had to sound pretty bad. So don't worry. I'm not worrying about it. I know you're doing okay. And then she wanted to know if I could send her the details again of the Labrador breeder. Because before all this started, she was looking at getting a puppy for the children. Because she always wanted a puppy, so she wanted to get a puppy for the kids, the family, and Aaron had come round to getting it. Well, sort of come round. He hadn't totally come round, but I think she decided that he was going to come round, as Kate does. And so she wanted me to send her those details because she'd lost the details of that breeder. So this is 2 days before she died. She was getting organised, and someone else told, I think it was my sister-in-law, Aaron's sister, said that she was also organising a party of some sort, a Thermomix party, I think it was.
Oh, yes.
I think she was organising a Thermomix party. Yes. And she was doing Tuesday, she was calling people about that. The Thermomix
That's right,
party.
yes. No, yeah, I got a text message from her, and they have this special indoor plant, and she knows that it's very rare, and she goes, do you mind if I have one of those plants? And I was like, oh gosh, you're trying to make me feel guilty. And I was like, yes, you can have one, but you are not allowed to share it with anyone else. And that was actually the last text message I got from her. And she was texting me about who do I get in touch with to organise this Thermomix party.
Yes.
So yeah, thanks for the
reminder. I know, she was just so, everything was just going so well. And she was going to have a scan that day, but apparently they couldn't fit her in for a scan, so she was going to come home and have one at Dunstan. But I know the family down there, they were concerned about her coming home because she was very weak, and they thought she should stay longer in hospice, but Kate apparently was adamant, and she wanted to be home, and they did agree that the trip home that was terrible because she slept all the way, she was so weak, and they were really worried she wasn't going to get home okay. But the minute she walked in the door, apparently it was just a different person. She just sparked up and so much happier. She just wanted to get home. She just wanted to be home. And even the hospice doctor I spoke to, who was absolutely wonderful, that the hospice and the doctor, the staff there, again, most amazing people. And it's all on donations, not government funded. I was just blown away by that. But he actually said he had many conversations with Kate, and he said that he knew that, well, certainly she knew the TIPS procedure she didn't have long. He thought it could be weeks to months, but even he was shocked that it happened so soon. He was more than happy for her to go home because he said there's nothing more they could do for her there, and he thought she might as well go home because he thought she had some time left and she might as well spend it at home with her family. And it's a bit fuzzy for me because I don't know all the details, but the morning after she got home, she actually, she wasn't feeling very well, and so she went to the medical centre, and she actually had a cardiac arrest at the medical centre, and they did revive her. Took 45 minutes apparently, but she was not in a good way, and then she and Aaron had to make a decision then as to whether they were going to go back to Dunedin or not. It was she couldn't do it anymore. She just didn't have it in her anymore to push. So that's when they decided she would stay in the hospice at the medical centre.
She was surrounded by people in those last hours. And I remember getting you on the phone and putting you on Kate's chest to just speak to her. They say that the last sense to go is the hearing.
Yes.
So, people were touching her and massaging her and just talking to her, laughing, playing music. And, you did have an opportunity to speak to her. And again, she did respond. She made a moan sound, which she hadn't done for a long time over those few hours. So I really do think that she heard what you had to say.
Yeah, no, that was a great opportunity actually, because as you can imagine, just so far away and not being able to do anything or see anything, and knowing that that she wasn't going to last the day. That was I didn't expect that to be able to talk to her. It was great, because so often you don't get a chance to talk to someone in that situation and to say what you want to say. So it was good, even though I did try and keep it lighthearted. I didn't want it didn't sound. I wanted her to know that I was okay. That was more important for her to know that I was okay.
How do you hope that Kate's story will change the way breast cancer is tested and diagnosed in young women?
Oh, well, I'm hoping that now every time a young woman, no matter what their age, that they will go to the doctor and the doctor will say, let's get it tested. I mean, I know they've brought the age down. I know in Australia and New Zealand, I believe it's free from 50. Well, they actually send you an invitation in Australia from 50 to 75, and they encourage you to have them every 2 years. I think from age 40 you can get free screening, and I think that's similar in New Zealand. I mean, anybody can get a screening, but I think it's sort of around the $200 mark. I think that's about right. Is it $150, $200 to get a breast screen done, which is small price. People might think, that's if they haven't got insurance, that's a small price to pay for your life, especially when we know that breast cancer is one of the most easily detected in the early phases, and has the best outcome of any cancer if it's picked up early.
From what I understand, it's quite rare here for younger women under the age of 40. Even if they have the BRCA gene, it's only 8% of cases.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. What do you think are the specifics that actually need to change?
If we think it's abnormal, then it should be treated as such. And I think that's something where it's a shame with the New Zealand government that they've got these guidelines. I think whether they need to put more money into it, or whether to make it more accessible for women. I don't know how accessible for screening is there either over there. I know here it's very accessible in the regions and in rural and regional Australia, or New South Wales anyway. It's not that hard. They do have mobile vans.
I think it's reasonable that if a woman presents with breast cancer symptoms, even if it's just one strong symptom, no matter what her age or lifestyle, that they should get it investigated.
Yes, absolutely.
How does the diagnostic process for breast cancer in New Zealand compare to that of Australia?
That's a good question. Or based on my experience here with I would have thought it's worse in New Zealand, but I have recently come across similar cases to Kate, and not necessarily in regional areas. They've actually been in city areas as well, where again they've been dismissed as being unlikely to be what they think a breast tumour. It's probably just a cyst. It's probably just this. So I think worldwide, maybe, certainly in both countries, as you say, no matter what the lifestyle, no matter what the age, no matter, if they don't tick any of the factors, it should be investigated properly. Yeah.
So what do you think the next steps are? What do you think would be ideal to happen from a government perspective to help women in New Zealand?
I think the government should make it, they should change those guidelines to make it more much easier for doctors, the medical practitioners, to actually do what they want to do, basically. Because I know when I spoke to my friend, she said a lot of doctors, they want to do it, but they've got these guidelines, and so they're reluctant to, because they're worried that they're going to be, they have to explain, and if it turns out it's not, then they're going to do it, please explain. So if they relax those guidelines a bit, especially not in all areas, but certainly in the area of breast cancer and breast tumours, as I said, in any age group, in any female, or even men. I mean, men get it as well. But if someone has, if it's a suspicious lump, even if they're in a grey area like Kate was, it should be fully investigated.
So, how are you coping as a family now?
I think quite well, actually. I have my moments. I have, like initially with I was told, milestones will impact on you, and I hadn't had anything till Christmas. Christmas Day wasn't so bad, but the next day I went down and cried and cried and cried, and then I decided it would be good for me to have 2 weeks off after Christmas rather than work. Wasn't a very smart idea because I actually was not distracted enough. And I found those 2 weeks very, very difficult. Every day I thought about Kate, every day, and every day I'd cry. Not that that's a problem, because I know crying's good. And I would speak to my girlfriend, and sometimes one night I rang her. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, because I couldn't. I just wanted to cry, and she said, "Anytime." As Kate's godmother, she said, she said, "That's fine, that's fine," and I was fine after that. I just, I didn't want to wake Michael up, and I didn't want to. So I thought I had the need, and so I just went out in the dark, and sitting out in the dark, so I just, it was a mild evening, so I just rang her, and she was fine with it. So, but yeah, and I found I've had some really interesting experiences though, where that I've told people where I feel she's present, and little things that happen. And it's really funny how I've become very conscious of butterflies. I don't know that I just wasn't aware of them before, or where there are more butterflies visiting me. I found one in Kate's room recently. It was quite funny. There's a butterfly in her room, and I picked it up and put it on my hand, and it just sat on my hand, and then I opened the window and it flew out the window. It was really spooky, because I thought, what are you doing in here? Yeah, because Kate's room's closed all the time at the moment, because it's winter, it's cold, and we don't need it.
Well, it is interesting because I've just been watching that Netflix series, Surviving Death, and they talk about some of the weird things that happen. And people often say butterflies is a sign.
Yes, and I did some reading too, and it said that apparently the black and white butterflies, which these are, it's all the black and white ones, are usually souls that haven't actually, they're still hanging around. They haven't settled down. They're still visiting other people, and they're still around.
Mm.
So that's, so I find that I talk to the butterflies.
Because Christmas time was sort of a year since you had last seen Kate physically.
Yes.
When you were in Mexico, and we're almost coming up to a 1-year anniversary of her passing, which was late June.
25th, yes.
Yeah, 25th of June. And you've just had Mother's Day as well. How did that
go? That was also difficult. Not as, it wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be to start with, except when Kate's brother, my son, sent me a very moving text message, and that I cried. I hadn't cried before that. And as I said to a number of people, I got more messages on Mother's Day than I've ever had before. So it ended up being lovely. And I went out with a friend. I went out with my naturopath friend. We went out to the opera in the afternoon, so that was good. But yeah, it was ended up being a good day and all. It was. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It didn't hit me like Christmas did, which was sad. Christmas was sad. Sunday wasn't sad. It wasn't a bad day at all. It was emotional but not sad. Well, now I'm looking forward to actually getting back to New Zealand. We're actually booked to fly in less than, it's just over a week now, I think. We're flying to about 10 days. Yeah, we're flying to New Zealand to be there in time for our granddaughter's birthday. She's 6 on the 25th. So, she said to me when we left New Zealand last year, she said, "Will you be here for my birthday?" And I said, "I'll try." So I said, yeah, and so it should be that'd be exciting. And we're staying long enough. We're staying for 2 weeks because I wanted to be there on the anniversary of Kate's birthday.
Mm-hmm.
It was a choice between that and I decided I didn't really want to be the anniversary of her passing. I know that Kate's or Olivia's godmother is going over at that time, so that's good. So she'll be there with them. But we will do something here in Australia. I know some of her university friends want to do something in Sydney. They're talking about something like flowers on the ocean at Bondi, because she loved the beach, loved the water. And so there's some talk of that. So there's something. And we do plan to have a memorial of sorts later in the year with all her friends and relatives, possibly in Sydney. We were going to go and do it in Tamworth, and then we realised that most of her family and friends no longer live in Tamworth, and it's much more accessible for them to go to Sydney. You know, those beautiful children, they are going to be her legacy, because they will be her. Because as everybody knows, who knew Kate, and they know now Olivia and Ed, they will be her legacy. They will be her forever. And that's one of the things for me. I might have lost Kate, but I have those beautiful grandchildren. And every time I look at Ed, he's looking more like his mother every day. It's amazing. Every time I speak with Olivia and see Olivia, I think, oh God, she is her mother. She is just her mother all over. Her personality, it could not be any more like Kate's. It really couldn't. Her sense of humour, she can be such a clown. Her she's a very caring, compassionate little girl. She's headstrong and determined and independent. So she just ticks all those boxes. And I think she's going to do well in whatever she does, because she will have that determination that her mother had.
What is the legacy that Kate has left behind?
I believe Kate has left several legacies, in my opinion. Obviously, all her wonderful achievements, the wonderful things that she achieved, and the many hats she wore in her lifetime. Her beautiful children, her beautiful, healthy, happy, well-adjusted children. They would be an amazing legacy ongoing, obviously. But probably the biggest legacy, and I think this would be one that Kate would agree with, is all the women who managed to experience the joy of motherhood because of Kate's help and her love and support. And not only those women, but there are other women out there over the years that she's helped with other women's health issues. And I don't know how many people know that Kate has written several ebooks and been involved with many, many podcasts involving not just nutrition but women's health and fertility in particular, because of her own journey, because Kate was told that she would never have children without IVF. And of course, Kate, being Kate, said, well, I think they're wrong. And she proved them so. And then after that, she thought, well, I have managed to achieve a pregnancy when they told me I couldn't. So I'm sure there are other women out there in the same position as I am who haven't had the time or to do the research or the knowledge that she had, or the actual desire to pursue it. And she's put these things into a book. And I know Kate's book has been very, very popular. And at the moment, it's actually out of print. Or it's still, there's some copies around, but there's not many. I've had a lot of people ask me about her book. And I know I spoke to Kate not long before she passed, and she was hoping to get a reprint of the book. She wanted to find a new publisher. So at the moment, that's one thing we're looking for. I'd like to try and find a publisher to get her work back out there again, because it's important work, and I know that she would want to get more copies out there to help more people.
Amazing. I think that this is a good place to end, and I am so grateful that you have opened your heart and shared with us what would be a very, very challenging last year for you.
Yes, yeah.
And helping people understand what was going on in the background, and as a mother to a daughter who was going through a cancer experience and is no longer with us here today.
Yes, thank you, Jen. Actually, it was great to have the opportunity to talk about it and talk openly, and certainly, as you say, to clear up some of the concerns and misconceptions for all her followers, because I know there were some people out there who loved and still loved Kate, and were shocked. And even now, people say to me, what happened? That just was just so sudden. So it's good to be able to explain to people, what actually happened and why it happened, and that Kate didn't. She lost the war, but she won the biggest battle, and so they should never give up. Yeah, family, faith, and friends.
Yeah. And we both hope that this podcast and this interview does get spread far and wide and help many other people in similar situations out there and give perspective on life as well and mortality.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Robyn. Thanks for learning with me on the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. If you like what you've heard, I would love if you could rate, review, and share with your friends. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. My handle is The Art of Listening to Your Body. If you're interested in working with me, I offer online courses for the general public and trainings for practitioners, therapists, and coaches. I also open limited one-to-one coaching spaces throughout the year. If you would like to find out more, head to my website, drjinong.com.